Now I'm looking at one headline. I'll touch on this and then turn it over to Dr. Reed Sheftall. By the way, Dr. Sheftall has, I don't know how to put it. I don't want to be too blustering about it, but a resume that's about as long as my arm. And I'm always thankful to have him with us. Dr. Sheftall literally is a heart surgeon, a plastic surgeon. He is a graduate from MIT in physics. He was a former instructor in physics at the University of Southern California, author of several books exposing COVID murders, and I'm thankful that he's with us. Dr. Sheftall, thank you so much for being with us today. Looking forward to your dialogue and discussion, and some of the things we might go back and retrace to set the stage for some that have not heard you and our interviews, and then we'll pick up from there. But I'm going to read you, Dr. Sheftall, the headline. 5 years on, true counts of COVID-19 deaths remain elusive, and research is hobbled by the lack of data. Policymakers and researchers quickly discovered a troubling pattern. Many deaths linked to the virus were never officially counted. A study analyzed data from over 3,000 U.S. counties between March 2020 and August 2022 found nearly 163,000 excess deaths from natural causes, and they were missing from the official mortality records. Now, I could go on. It's a 5-page massive article, but it was deception par excellence, if you want to call it that. It was deception where, let's just use an illustration that I want you to speak to that and then go from there. In South Florida, a young man, I've forgotten his age, was involved in an accident, vehicle accident. He was on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital where he later died. He was listed as dying from COVID. Address that. What kind of bubble of lies would we be in as a nation where our health officials are willing to do things like that? And at least in just a 2-year period of time. This is not a full conclusive record or research, but just in a 2-year period of time, 163,000 that died from other causes were shown as dying from COVID. What was the rationale behind that, and how should we view that?
Well, thank you, Dr. Youngblood. It's just the tiniest tip of an enormous iceberg of deception, if you will. I know about that case where the motor vehicle accident was assigned to COVID, but that was something that, again, was a tiny fraction of what they got away with. The CARES Act was a mistake, in my opinion. That was the act that paid hospitals extra cash for testing for COVID, for calling the patient's diagnosis COVID, for putting people in the ICU, for putting them on ventilators. Putting them on ventilators accounted for $38,000 for each time that was done for the hospital.
Right.
And I don't know if you've heard this, but 2020 and 2021 were the highest profits for hospitals recorded in history.
Right.
And they did it because they got all that extra money from the CARES Act, which none of which should have been added to the normal reimbursement.
Good example of what you're saying. Yes, good example of what you're saying. The Ascension Hospital Group, one of the larger ones in America, and that time frame that you just spoke of, their net profit was up 571%. Net profit, 571% increase because of the CARES financial embellishment that caused hospitals and doctors and medical associations to go for the dollars and not be concerned about the patient. Am I too critical on that?
No, not at all. And Ascension was the medical group that was bribing the doctors to vaccinate their patients. Have you seen that?
Yes.
That it was exposed by Representative Thomas Massey
Yes.
of Kentucky. I spent the weekend again watching the ACIP meeting. And remember, ACIP stands for Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. It's the committee from which Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired all of the people on the committee a few months ago and caused an enormous uproar.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it was a good thing that he did, because I've been watching the hearings since then, and what the original committee members got away with is absolutely criminal. I was going to talk about, if we have time, how trials are, what are the pillars of a proper trial, and then show how hepatitis B, which is the vaccine of note right now, about whether or not they should continue it, how hepatitis B failed on all of those pillars of the quality trial. It's just disgraceful what they allowed to go through and be injected into our babies. Hepatitis B, is one of the injections that occurs on the day of birth.
Yes.
Did you know that there are 2 vaccines that are injected in utero before the child is even born?
Did not know that.
Isn't that disgraceful? I'll tell you. If you'd allow me, I'd like to talk about what I learned from that, and then we can.
I'd like to. Let me trace a rabbit or two first.
Okay.
Sure. I'm looking at the headline that says FDA to tighten vaccine rules after memo ties COVID-19 shots to child deaths. Explain that. I think you're familiar with it.
Okay, could you say that one more time, please?
It's where the FDA has discovered that COVID-19 shots are associated with child deaths.
Yes, right. Vinay Prasad, who works at the FDA now, is in charge of vaccination, and he put out a very strong statement this week that said they can now connect some child deaths to the COVID vaccine. It was a very strong statement. Up until now, the narrative people, the government narrative people, have been denying that the vaccines cause death in children. He says he can prove it.
Yes.
That a number of children have died from it.
In fact, with this article alone, it says they have discovered at least 10 died immediately after receiving COVID-19 shot.
Right. Well, I can, from what I've already explained on your show, Pastor, you can see how that could easily happen, because the vaccines, which are mod RNA molecules inside a lipid net, as we know, were based on the genome of the so-called SARS-2 virus, okay? And that virus made a genome that exists only in silico, not in real life, as I've explained many times.
Yeah.
And I've explained how I came to that conclusion. So you can easily expect and understand that the mod RNA vaccines they were based on a genome that didn't exist. So of course they were just trash, genomic trash, if you will. So I'm not surprised at all that it killed some of the children who received it. Not at all.
And that's what their research shows. We don't know how many others, because let's face it.
Can I just interject something real quick?
Yeah.
There's a former physicist, actually he's still a physicist, but he's diverted his academic practice now to statistical analyses. His name is Denny Rancourt. He's from Canada. And he did the analysis on the total number of deaths from the vaccines, and I haven't studied this or looked over it, so I'm just repeating what he said, which I don't like to do, but I want to put that caveat on it. His calculations showed that 17 million people died from the vaccine.
Across the nation.
Across the world.
Across the world.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. That's
I don't doubt
absurd.
it at all. I don't doubt it at all.
If that's true, and I don't have much reason to doubt him, although I like to prove everything to myself, that's the way I like to do things. That's outrageous.
It is.
Because I can tell you, like I've said a few times on your show already, the SARS-2 virus did not exist. The entire thing was made up. So that means there was no SARS-2 virus and there was no COVID-19.
Question that
It was simply a rebranding of other diseases.
Yes, that goes back to my basic question. Dr. Sheftall, explain this to us, to me, and to our listeners. There's supposed to be trials, research, analyses done to verify the efficacy of a vaccine or a shot before it's put into the human body.
Right.
If all of these things we're now finding 5 years later, what does that tell us about the basic research? Explain some of that flawed research to us.
Okay, first of all, there was enormous fraud in the trials. We've uncovered it. It's just blatant fraud by Pfizer and Moderna.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just review, if you'd like me to, the reason why I believe there was no virus.
Okay.
Okay, there are three pillars of virus existence, if you will, and you have to satisfy all three of them. But SARS-2 did not satisfy any of the three, and they are cytopathic effects, photographic evidence, and sequencing of the genome. So let me go over those three real quick in an abbreviated way, because I know a lot of people have heard this from me already, and it's explained very, very detailed in my book. The book, incidentally, is called Sanction the COVID Murders, and we'll talk about where people can get it later. Let me just go over these three things.
Okay.
Cytopathic effects are what everyone is taught in school, in biology, about how viruses replicate. They get into cells inside of our bodies, they hijack the replication machinery like the ribosomes, allow their RNA to get copied, which copies all of the components of the virus itself, and makes millions of copies, and then the cell breaks open and releases those copies, okay, to be breathed out in the case of a respiratory virus, or to infect another cell and make more copies, okay? That's how the virus survives, let's say.
Right.
The problem is, in real life, when a patient was underwent bronchoalveolar lavage, which is when we put water down into their lungs, under anesthesia, of course, slosh it around a little and suck it out, we get a liquid that has RNA in it, it has viruses in it, supposedly, it has bacteria in it, it has it has RNA and so forth from the patient himself, etc. And the way that cytopathic effects are demonstrated in real life is they assume that there's a virus in that bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, and after removing big pieces of cellular debris and so forth, they pour it over a culture of African green monkey kidney cells, if you've ever heard that. They're called Vero cells. And they also supply fetal bovine serum to the mix. And that's to keep the cells alive for a few days. Then they increase the amount of antibiotics, of gentamicin that's in there, and amphotericin B, and both of those are toxic to kidney cells. And that's very key to this whole thing. And then the cells start to break open, and particles, they appear in the milieu of the broken cell. And they're calling those viral particles. Okay? And they're saying they came from the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, right? Which is mixed over the Vero cells. But we've done experiments now where we don't even add the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid. So there's no way a virus could be involved in the breaking open of the cells. Follow me? Yeah, so we still see those same cells there. And even the Journal of Virology has said that there is no way you can tell the difference between an exosome, which is what those brown things are, and viruses. This is the Journal of Virology, who is of vested interest in proving that viruses exist. Okay? So we've proven that you get the cytopathic effects when you don't even add the potential virus in the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid. So that's one of the pillars that doesn't work. The other one is photographic evidence. When we see those round particles after the cell is broken open, we need to look at them with an electron microscope, right? Because they're too small to be seen with a light microscope. Okay, they're only 100 nanometers in diameter, and the visible spectrum of what can be seen with a light microscope goes from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers, because those are the limits of the visible spectrum in the electromagnetic spectrum. And I don't mean to get too technical there. I'm just saying that we have to look at what comes out of a cell that's broken with an electron microscope, because they're too small, that literally they're invisible. They can't be seen with a light microscope. So the photographic evidence fails. The Journal of Virology says that nobody can tell the difference between an exosome, which is what those things are. They're not viruses, and a virus. And I know they're exosomes because exosomes always appear when there's cell damage. Okay, always. It's a known fact by all biologists. And it fails on the photographic evidence because the virologists are claiming that those are viral particles, but they appear when we don't even let the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid be poured over the legs. Do you follow me? So we know they're not viruses. So that's pillar number 2 that fails. Pillar number 3 is sequencing the virus. And the problem with that is the way they isolate viruses, they spin it down, they spin the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid down in a centrifuge.
Yes.
And centrifuges, as you know, and the audience knows, separate things based on density.
Yes.
So something like lead, a lead ball and a ping pong ball are going to be in different bands if they spin around a lot. The lead's going to go further out in the test tube, if you will.
Correct.
Okay. Now, here's the problem. Yes, you can separate DNA from RNA because they have different densities. One's deoxyribonucleic acid, and the other one's ribonucleic acid. So they're different, and they're going to have different densities. So they'll separate into different bands. And proteins also will find their own band. But you can't separate RNA from people, from viruses, supposedly, from bacteria, from fungi. RNA is RNA. So you cannot separate those out. So what you end up doing is, without me going through next generation sequencing completely, basically what happens is they find millions of these things called reads, which are short pieces of RNA in the bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, and they assemble them into a genome. A computer does that. People don't do it, a computer does it. And that's why it only exists in silico, because computer chips are made out of silicon. So it's kind of a nice way to talk about made in the computer.
Made in
We call it
computer,
in
yes.
silico. So that making the correct genome for the virus fails completely. It makes a genome that doesn't even exist in nature.
Right.
And that's what the vaccines were based on. So it's ridiculous to think that those vaccines are going to keep you from transmitting anything that exists in nature.
Absolutely.
And that's why very quickly, very quickly during the process, less than a month after the vaccines came out, I made a video and wrote a paper and explained to everyone that these things aren't blocking people from, they're not preventing people from getting the disease at all. I looked at Israeli data to do it because they were more efficient at getting shots into the arms, vaccines into the arms. And I proved it first. And it wasn't until April that the CDC data jocks agreed with me and agreed that I was correct.
Absolutely. In fact, Dr. Sheftall, I believe we could summarize this portion. I'm looking at the headline, "We were lied to about everything about COVID," says Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We were lied to, he said, about everything around COVID. That's a pretty, how would you say, large statement.
Strong statement.
Strong statement.
Very
Absolutely.
strong statement.
So that kind of summarizes what we're talking about thus far. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the top of the hour news break right after the news. We'll be right back as we continue to face the issues.